everybody. Hi. Happy October, almost November. Oh my gosh, like time has flown. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. I'm excited as always, but I'm really excited. This is a special group of people that we have with us today for our conversation. And we're talking about a position that was created a little over 2 years ago at the state level for each of our state chapters. It is the Alliance Liaison role. And so we have three of our wonderful Alliance Liaisons, and we want to talk to them about what they do in their profession, what led them to become Alliance, involved with the Alliance, and what being the Alliance Liaison means to them. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you what state they represent and what it is that they do for a living in terms of their perinatal mental health work that they do. So, Michonne, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Michonne Carrington. I'm a registered nurse. I'm actually the program administrator for Nurse Family Partnership here in Guilford County, North Carolina. So I work with first time at risk in low income mothers having their first baby.
Oh, wow.
And we work with them until their babies are 2 years of age on any and everything that they are wanting to learn about on how to have a healthy pregnancy, how to have a healthy baby, and how to become the best mothers that they want to be. So that's what I do. And I'm in North Carolina.
That's amazing. I don't know if I knew all that about you, Michonne. Thank you for sharing. Thanks. Hi, Angel.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Tell us about yourself.
All right, so I am a doula. I am located in Clarksville, Tennessee. I'm also a public health advocate and educator. I also have, so I pretty much am, I work for myself. I started a 501c3 2 years ago, and we assist underrepresented, underserved populations in my community. And that can range from people with disabilities, as I am a mother of a child with a disability. That can be low income families, teen moms. So we just kind of just want to bridge the gaps.
Thank you so much, Angel. From Tennessee, North Carolina. Hi, Loudy. Loudy's real special to us around here.
Hi, Andra. It's so nice to connect with you in these events always. I'm Laudy Burgos, and I am a social worker. And I work at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City in OBGYN. So I supervise all the workers who work with patients in the clinic, patients with perinatal loss, depression and anxiety during pregnancy. So all the whole spectrum and fertility. And I have a small private practice also where I see women with perinatal mental health disorders. So really passionate about that work. And I also am the Alliance rep on the board, on the main board of directors for PSI. So happy
Yeah,
to be here.
happy to. She's not only the Alliance rep, she's the vice chair of the PSI board. Yeah. And our Alliance rep, she's all in. And our Alliance rep for New York. And she was one of the original members of the Alliance board of directors when it was the Alliance as it existed before PSI brought it under its wing. Yeah, thank you guys. So let's start with you, Angel. I want to know what made you interested in working in the perinatal health field in the first place? Like, what brought you in?
So it was just personal experience. I had my son right before, well, my second child right before the world shut down from COVID. Um, and going through that, experience of not having support, not being able to leave the home, was definitely a challenge. And being a military family, I've had children in 3 different states. So I had the opportunity of experiencing maternal health care in different states. And my first time was up north in Maryland, and my second time was in Georgia. So it was a complete 360, a complete change in care that was provided. And so I was like, after that, I just wanted to be able to advocate for other families. And educate them as much as possible about the resources that are available to them that I had no idea were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's really, I'm glad that you pointed out that we live in one country, but sometimes, depending on where you are in the country, it's a very different experience to give birth to a child. depending on where you are. What about you, Loudy? What drew you into this work in the first place?
So I kind of fell into it a little bit by accident because I started working at the hospital in pediatrics. I was in pediatric pulmonary, and my grant ended, and my boss was like, "Where are we going to put you?" And it just so happened around the same time a position became open within women and children's, which is where I wanted to stay. But it was in OBGYN, not in pediatrics. So I moved here, and I immediately, I mean, I felt at home. I started doing intakes. I started seeing patients, and I felt like, wow, this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. And then when I had my second child, while I was pregnant, I had a 2 year old at the time and pregnant, and um, my husband left, and I, went through like a really rough time trying to adjust becoming a single mom. And after I had my second child, I had postpartum depression, and you know, I kept thinking, wow, I feel crummy, but I have support. And I started thinking about all the women that I was seeing that didn't have support. So they were dealing with postpartum depression, but also no support, no access to resources. There was so much more. And that's when I really said to myself, I really need to learn more so that I can best serve this population. And I started getting training so that I could best serve them.
That's amazing. Thanks, Loudy. Thank you all for sharing your personal experiences too. Michonne, how did you find your way into this aspect of like nursing?
Well, I've actually been a nurse for over 39 years, and I have been a labor and delivery nurse, maternal child nurse all of my career. But it was not until I actually experienced postpartum depression personally that I actually came to the realization that there's more to this than meets the eye.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had postpartum depression with my first child to the point where I believe I was bordering on psychosis because the first year of her life, I don't remember. There are just bits and pieces that I can recall. So when I went back to work after having her, I really wanted to get more involved in helping the mothers that, I was seeing in labor and delivery and in postpartum with their perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And now, after discovering PSI, really getting involved and wanting to know more and more and more about postpartum mood and anxiety disorders, it has just been a lifelong dream to get involved and help mothers with this, because I wouldn't have wished that on my worst enemy, really, the way that I was feeling and what I went through and the feelings that I had. And while I had support, I felt like I didn't have support, not the support that I really needed, because when I reached out to my OBGYN, he didn't even look at me. He looked at my husband and said, now, if she acts like she can't take care of that baby and can't take care of herself, I'll put her, you call me and I'll put her on something, and I'm like, "Now, wait a minute, I'm the patient here, I'm the one that's suffering through this, but you're talking to him like I'm not even sitting here." So I knew there had to be more to this, and had to be something that I could get involved in and do.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. And I know that that's probably been a little while ago, but I've had guests on Color in a Conversation that have talked about even recent birthing experiences in like the last 5 years, where that's been the case. Like the doctor is not talking to the birthing person, not talking to the person that's or the person is voicing that something I'm not feeling right or I'm not feeling well, which continues, I think, to be why the alliance and the work that we do is so necessary in this perinatal mental health space, because even with all of the statistics and the studies and the stuff that comes out that shows who's adversely impacted during the perinatal period, during birth, we still have providers and other folks acting and treating people of color with the stories we hear about people's voices not being heard. Um, they're they're not being considered the expert on their own bodies and their own like minds, and so I can imagine, right, if, and I've had that experience myself. It's a lot of people I think that are drawn into this work are drawn because of very personal experiences with perinatal mood disorders or things that happen postpartum or during pregnancy. And for me, it was both postpartum depression after having my son, but also the depression that came with, several pregnancy losses, right? And not really knowing who or how, or thinking that it was appropriate for me to turn to anybody, because the message that I fed myself, that I think that I had been kind of unconsciously fed, was like, we pick ourselves up and we move forward. Like, you can't stay stuck in these feelings. You pick yourself up and you move forward. And so thank you all for sharing and for the work that you've been doing. And I'm so glad that each of you are doing the work that you're doing where you are. I'm curious, Loudy, how long have you been involved with the Alliance? How did you hear about the Alliance, and what made you want to get involved? You're on mute, Loudy.
Oh, sorry about that. So I actually, so I became involved with PSI like 10 years ago. And then during one of the conferences, or I guess after one of the conferences where the founders of the Alliance connected, I think maybe the following year, I had gone and they had like a little meetup. And so I had gone and I had sort of like learned this is right a place for us to get together and meet and network. And so that's how I originally heard about it, when that year after they met and they sort of founded the Alliance, that it was like a meetup and just talking to other people, taking a picture. And then I think like maybe a year after that, because I connected with the founders during that year whenever they had the meetup, and I said, it's really important that everyone feels included, right? And so there's so many different people representing in PSI, and it would be really great if sort of like some of us felt this way. I'm sure there are other people of color that felt this way, and it would be great to include everyone. And I've met a lot of the Latinx folks, and happy to start talking about the Alliance and bring them in. And so a few months later, they had reached out to me and they said, you're so right. And we want to include everyone. We want to get different representatives to bring people in. So they invited me to be on the board. And that's how I, started working with them.
Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad that you did that. So glad that you did that and that you were that voice, Loudy. What about you, Angel? How did you find PSI and the Alliance?
So it was so funny. I had joined a doula business where like we were all a team, and we were doing a meet and greet for parents, and I met Talia. She had stopped me and she was like telling me all about PSI, and we were just talking, and then eventually she came back and she was like, hey, I think that you'd be great if you would would you like to help co-host some support groups? And I was like, oh yeah, sure, but what do I need to do, because I've never done this. I'm still a new doula. And from there I just fell in love with the mission of PSI, all of the initiatives and things that they do in the community. And so then I moved to Clarksville in Tennessee, and it wasn't the same, because it's just a different, it's different. And I met someone who was on the board, but she was leaving, and she said, hey, like, I know you have experience with working with PSI. Would you like to, take my place? And so I was like, okay, sure. And I'm going to conference. I'm at the airport, and that's where I meet Shamika and Janina for the first time. Like I never met them before. And that's when Shamika was like, "Hey, would you like to be the Alliance Liaison?" And I was like, "Absolutely. I don't know what I'm doing, but like I want to do it. I'm gonna learn what we're doing and just take off from there." So that's how I was brought in.
Yeah. Like, hey, that's what we do, right? We find people, we're gonna pull you in quick.
Absolutely.
Pull you in quick. What about you, Michelle? How did you find PSI in the Alliance?
Well, I've been a member of PSI probably about 8 or 9 years. Like I said, when I heard about PSI and actually heard more about postpartum support and the PMADs and everything, I was like, well, yeah, I'd love to join. And then I became a chapter member, and they didn't have an alliance rep. And I had gone to several conferences, and like Loudy, I went to one of the meetups and saw all these people of color from all over the world. I'm like, wow, there are actually people like me that come to this conference every year and want to know more about Postpartum Support International. So I actually went back to the chapter and said, yes, I would like to be the Alliance rep. And it's been there ever since.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Michelle, I'm going to stay with you. So what
Okay.
does being an Alliance rep mean to you?
Well, it gives me a voice, an actual voice for people of color to be able to take back to the chapter. Because, for one, there are very few people that look like me on the North Carolina chapter. And so being able to voice diversity, inclusion, equity, they're not just buzzwords. They're actually there's meaning behind it. And to be able to say, have you thought about it from this lens? Have you looked at it from the people of color's lens to say or see what we're doing or how we're doing it or how we're approaching people, the way we talk about things? That makes a lot of difference. So that's what made me want to be the Alliance rep, and what really drew me into knowing where my place was. And there have been a couple of folks that say, well, don't you want to, because I'm also the Alliance, not the Alliance rep, but also the it's escaping me.
Board liaison.
Yes, a board liaison. So I'm like, no, I want to stay on the Alliance. I don't want to give up my position. I'm not giving it up.
Yes, I love that. And it's so heartening to hear you say that, and like what it means to you, and because that's exactly when Jen Davis, my colleague, and I, who Jen is the director for our chapters and affiliates program for PSI National. And when we before I came on board, as soon as I found out I had gotten the job as the Alliance director, Jen was in my interview. But as soon as she found out that I accepted, on my old email, before I even was a PSI employee, she was emailing me saying, I can't wait to work with you. and so part of what we conceptualized in like adding this Alliance liaison position to the board is to do exactly the stuff that you're saying, right? To make sure that these conversations about equity, and are you thinking of it? Let's think about this and make sure that we're including everybody in this state when we're talking about what we want to do, right? And so that just warms my heart. Loudy, you've been involved with the Alliance for so long before it became a part of PSI. So what does it mean? And you're in so many different ways too, right now. So what does it mean for you to be? What is an Alliance rep to you? What does that mean to you?
So I think, so I was an Alliance rep for New York, and then I stepped down to give someone else an opportunity, another person of color who just recently became involved with the Lions, so she kind of took over. But still on the board, I'm like a rep, right? Like I'm the Alliance rep. So I think it's sort of what Michonne said. It's giving a voice to us as people of color, and that's super important because I don't think I can really say how important it is that these conversations at the higher levels of the boards need to happen, because if anyone knows of a grant, right, or if there's a funder, like, we need the board to say, well, what about the alliance? What about the work of the alliance? We need to sort of stay very relevant, right? Because sometimes the needs of people of color are neglected. And I'm not saying that that's
Mhm.
what the board does, but I think the reason the board now is so much more aware of issues of equity and inclusion is because I'm there as the Alliance rep, and we've also diversified the board, which is great. But I'm always bringing information about the wonderful stuff that the Alliance is doing. Like when, the Alliance started the fellowship program, I was gushing. I was like talking about this and like giving details. Andrea and I, submit these reports to the board of everything that is going on. And they're like really impressed. And it's important to talk about the work we do and why it's important. And think about Black mortality rates and how huge that topic is. And so these are things that I always bring back. So it's stuff that the Alliance is doing, but it's also stuff that affects women of color or individuals of color in the perinatal mental health space. And then when I think about in the individual chapters, I remember when I was still a liaison or a rep, an Alliance rep, I remember one day I got an email, and one of the folks was like sending this email about, oh, I got contacted about this documentary or this film, and they want Black women, and should I speak to her? Who wants to speak? And I'm like, is she serious? I'm like, wait a minute, I can't be reading this. And then he responded, and I'm like, this should go to the Alliance. A Black person should talk to this woman. Like, I couldn't even believe. And, again, I'm not saying the intention, there were bad intentions, but again, it's like that is a microaggression in some ways, right?
Mhm.
Like it's,
Mhm.
and I said to myself, had I not been here as an Alliance rep, as the only person of color, would they have talked to that person? Like, would anyone have thought of this? So I really can't underscore how important our voice is in these spaces representing the Alliance.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Thank you so much for your advocacy and all the work you do on our behalf. Thank you so much. Angel, what you have anything to add? What does being an Alliance rep mean to you?
Yeah, I agree with what Laudia and Michonne said. It's really about having a voice, but also being seen. A lot of times when we look at the makeup of a board or the makeup of an organization, is there someone that looks like me? Is there someone who understands, the things that I'm going through? When I am working with different families, whether it's and I used to be a peer breastfeeding counselor, and to hear how many families came in and said, like, I finally am seeing someone who looks like me. Another thing amongst our community is a safe space, having a safe space to just be able to talk amongst others who actually understand and aren't trying to take that information back and report it or use it against you.
Yeah.
Um, that is very important. And to be able to voice that, and even if I'm at a table where I'm the only one, I'm the one to bring the perspective of, hey, like, let's look at these other factors, let's look at these numbers. Of course, like Aladi said about the maternal mortality rates, it is insane. And to know that this is continuing to happen, it's unfortunate, but we definitely need a voice. We need someone who looks like us and letting others know that, like, we are here. Please, like, come and speak with us, come and know that there are resources, even so much to our support groups online, the amount of mothers that are always, they're just looking for a safe space. And then, and now that we are educating and getting into educating the family members and the fathers too, because a lot of times, you know, we're not talking about as black or BIPOC husbands, right? Because they're going through things as well. So I think that just, you know, making, showing up, being the voice, and letting them know that there is a safe space.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I love it. Um, so I think that one of the things and I think that we can't underestimate, and sometimes I feel like I live in the bubble, right? Because I do this work with people who are really dedicated to making the lives of birthing people and their families like better. And I work at an organization that is very open and wanting to do that for communities of color. And I direct a program with the staff that I have wonderful people who are all people of color. And so sometimes, you know, we forget that because I'm surrounded by the folks that I can forget what it's like to be in the world and work in a context where you might be the only one that looks like you, right? That has this same kind of deep rooted passion, or even in spaces that are more progressive, you still might be the only one on the board or the only one at the table. And so having to come to the table and be that constant reminder sometimes can be it you do it because you're passionate about it, but it can also sometimes wear on you a little bit, right? And I want to go there for a second, and then I want to come back and ask some things about what you all have been doing specifically, kind of in your work with the Alliance and with PSI at your local chapters. But I just feel led to ask the question about, because you're such staunch advocates for people who and issues that pertain to people who are so often just like neglected, like Loudy said, we can be forgotten in the fray of all of what, you know, people are trying to do to make folks' lives better in this space. um, how do you work with keeping yourselves motivated for the work? Like, where do you find support for your work and continuing to be the voice for people who continue to bring those conversations up, Mashawn, about like, y'all forgot about the equity and inclusion piece of this again? Yeah. Where do you find the support to continue doing the work, Mashawn?
Every time I look in the face of one of my clients, and every time I hear one of my nurses talk about one of their clients suffering with a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder, that's where I find my motivation.
Mm.
Every time I think about what I went through and know that I, again, would not wish that on my worst enemy,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I get my motivation
Mm.
to continue to uh, attend the conferences. I make sure that my staff has the opportunity, not just my nurses, but the entire staff.
Mm.
I make sure that we have the funds so those that want to attend the conference can attend,
I love it.
as well as get their certification. Now, I don't have mine yet, and I say yet, but I will. Getting to it. I've got some other things on in the fire right now. But yes, making sure that they are getting what they need. That's where I get my motivation from.
I love it. I love it. Lottie, what about you? How do you continue to be motivated to do all this advocacy that you're doing?
Through mentorship. I think mentorship is so powerful. And so it's not, just about like a mentor teaching you, but just supporting you and kind of giving you that little push when you need it. So there are folks in this field that I've known for a while or that I tend to go to for just support. And just kind of talking about for, when they hold that space where I can talk about, yes, it's so rewarding, but I feel exhausted sometimes. And,
Mhm.
and because there is so much work to do, it's to work with patients, clients, but then there's also PSI stuff and I do other work, right? So it's like I feel like a little all over the place. And then how do you sort of hold that and balance also motherhood for those of us that are mothers?
Mhm.
And the work can be very triggering at time, even when you don't have newborns. You may have a teenager, you may have a young adult, and maybe you have issues with them. And, you know, kind of thinking about all of this, that I often think, oh my God, I'm helping all these parents, and, but I'm feeling not great as a parent today. And it's really going to my mentors, to just hear that, hear sort of like to refill my cup.
Mhm.
Self care is important,
Yeah.
being able to disconnect. And then the other thing is, and I know this sounds contradictory because I'm saying self care, disconnect, but also just going to workshops and events where I can network with other professionals who do this. I recently attended a perinatal loss CE, and it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. And although it was work and I was learning, but I left there feeling really good and feeling like, okay, I'm ready to do this again because I have some new tools. So,
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, those things can be re-energizing and kind of remind you of your purpose sometimes too. Angel, what about you? Where do you find the what you need to continue to do the work?
Yes, I am like Lottie. I was gonna say, um, it's more of like I am very adamant about boundaries and making time to take a break. Um, because I am like 1 year postpartum. And so um
Mhm.
having to be able to be like, okay, nope, this is getting to be too much. Seeking friends or a therapist, like really just being able to um relay and express my feelings and what I'm going through. It's also important that, having that strong circle or support of friends who will pour back into you, about like your passion and why you're doing it, and just reminding you um, that you're needed,
Yeah.
and it's okay to take a break because we're human too. So, and one of my favorite sayings now is that I like to tell clients or just other families or professionals, I'm like, sometimes I just go to events to just be a mom or participant. I don't want to be the professional in the room. I just want to be able to enjoy the actual event and then soak up all the information and leave without feeling like I have to teach and I have to, be the person that everyone is learning from. And I just want to be the sponge.
Yeah, yes, that's so good. I was thinking the same thing as I was thinking about especially when I used to work at this big hospital here in Chicago. And thinking about, you know, having to tell people who are not people of color, okay, just call them white folks because that's what we call them, right? That sometimes like you have to respect when even if you're curious about a cultural practice or something that's happening in broader society, like when the George Floyd murder happened, and working at a hospital that is very 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 white space, and senior leadership coming to the Black employees group and wanting us to like, can you give us some books or some articles? Can we do a roundtable? So, and having to say right now, no, like we don't want to be your educators. We don't want to be your teachers. We don't want to be, come and have to explain to you and talk about our feelings. Like we don't want to have to do that right now. No. And even as we are advocates and voices, and we are ones that are lights that are shining, shining light and bringing to light issues and the people who are often forgotten about. Like sometimes people take for granted that we're always going to be the folks that are going to do that aspect of people's work for them. And so being able to say, like, you need to think about this, or you need to consider this, but sometimes that's all I'm going to tell you is you need to think about how this is going to affect the Black mothers if you do that. And I don't need to educate you about what I mean by that. You need to figure it out, right? And not to continue for the labor to be put on people of color to continue to educate you about ourselves and how things are going to affect us. There's plenty of studies. There's plenty of books. There's plenty of do some of the work, and for us not to always be burdened with doing the work, even though the work brings us like passion and joy. Part of that restorative practice for me and that self-care is learning the boundary of saying no and not feeling guilty and obligated to be somebody else's educator all the time about like my experience, and for you to know that my experience as a Black woman in this country has some commonality with Michonne's, or some commonality with Angel's, or my experience as a woman and a professional of color has some commonalities with Loudy's, but you can't make those generalizations like as broad as people like to make them, to say that now I'm competent and I understand what it's like for a woman of color to work in this space. You don't. Like you have a window through my experience, but you don't. And there are limits to our understanding anyway, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Andrea, but I was thinking about, one of my colleagues during the pandemic put together a book called Latinx and Social Work. And it was narratives. I contributed to the first volume and I'm contributing to the third volume. And it's basically narratives. And that has never really been done before in our field. And it's really a bunch of, social workers, Latinx social workers, telling narratives. And some of those have trauma, and one of the reasons we did it was because it was healing, right? And it can be very controversial because in social work school, like in some other professions, it's very much like we're a blank slate, right? We don't talk about our feelings. We don't talk about this. And that doesn't work with people of color, right? Like, you're not going to come in, especially if you're a Black or brown woman, and I'm going to be like, oh, tell me the deepest parts of yourself, but I'm not going to share nothing about me.
Right.
That doesn't work. We know that, right? So, so we did it and it was healing and we shared. And one of the things we said was we are working with one of the schools with NYU and they're using it in some of those classes because we've done a lot of presentations on this, which is students of color in institutions and programs, nursing, social work, again, there's this burden that when you start talking about patients of color, all of a sudden everyone looks to you, like you said, with these books. And so what we're saying is, we're saying to some of these schools, look, we have some books here with narratives. You want to know about our trauma? Here, teach with this. Don't ask the student in your class to sort of like just, talk about or unload their trauma in front of everyone when they may not be ready. So we were talking about that. I was thinking about that, really that work needs to be done very differently because it really traumatizes folks of color.
Right. It can be traumatic in those spaces. And even so, thinking about what the Alliance Liaison is and what the Alliance Liaison is not, right? And so what the liaison's position is not this substitute for, or it's not meant to be this substitute for those chapter members who don't identify as people of color, for like this is the work we've done. The work, we have an Alliance Liaison, so having somebody in that space, that's the work. Or they're going to tell us about the concerns of every community of color, every person of color across this state. Like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And so what the Alliance Liaison is not is that it is and I don't know if any of you want to speak to like how you differentiate that, because there can be this tendency like jokingly, like I really watch like corny sitcoms as a way for me to decompress. And I noticed that a lot of the sitcoms that I watch and are most of the cast is white, and then there's like one black person or one Latinx person that's in the friend group. And so I was watching this sitcom the other day, and they have all the friends are white and there's one black guy, and his friends see him in the bar. He happens to be talking to this group of black people, and so then the white friends are like, "Oh no, do we not make him feel like he can be his whole black self with us?" And so then they want him to tell them all about the black stuff that he does. What was the black stuff you were talking about with the black people when we saw you? And so he kind of plays it up, like, yeah, we were talking about fried chicken and like all these stereotypical things, right? Um, but this sort of like point of comic relief, like I don't want to be the sole source of what you know about people of color, right? What's the difference between being a liaison to bring these issues to the fore and being the sole source of information that people have about what it means to be a person of color, living either as a professional or like having this experience as a during the postpartum period? Can anybody talk about what's the difference between those two things, Mashawn?
Yeah, I think, in my experience, it's not like you said. It's not to be that sole person, that token person to tell you everything you need to know, but to guide you in the path that you need to get to know. By providing trainings, information, things like that. Here's where you find it, and this is what the team needs, or the chapter needs in order to get us up to speed with everything else that's going on in the world. In this political climate that we're in right now, it's so much that is needed to be known, and I'm not the one to teach you all of that, but I can point you in the right direction.
Right.
And instead of being that person that's going to tell you everything, no, you need to learn it for yourself. I can teach you how to fish, but I'm not going to catch the fish for you.
Come on now, Michelle.
I love that.
Loudy, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, sort of to piggyback on that, if you recall, Andrea and I are actually in the DEI task force, and we're sharing, I guess, education and training, I think. And one of the first things I said is, yes, we can do some of the work, we can give some resources, but we need a consultant. And of course, I recommended the man I'm obsessed with, Ken Hardy, who is this Black man who does a lot of work on racial trauma. And I said, this is an investment, but we need to bring him in because, yes, Andrea and I we have some ideas, we can do some stuff, but ultimately, we don't represent every Black and brown person, right? And there may be things that we don't know. I mean, this man does this DEI consultant work for years and years, and he knows. And right, like, we need to invest. If this is important to us, we need to invest. Yeah. And I'm really proud, to be honest, of being part of this organization, because you can't just say we want to do the work, we want to be inclusive. You have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And if you look at our board now, it's very diverse. We have the Alliance. I think, we have a new CEO, deputy CEO. You don't see this in a lot of like big organizations. So, I will say, I do feel there is that commitment, but right. And it comes from the top, but there's so much work that has to be done, I think, in the state chapters, because depending on where you are, I mean, like Michelle said, there aren't a lot of people that look like her. And even in New York, I'm a New York City girl, so I'm around people of color all the time. But interestingly, when I joined the New York City chapter, everyone was white. And I was like, huh. And then I realized everyone who in that chapter is either upstate New York or Long Island. there's no one from New York City, which I thought was strange.
Mm-hmm.
But but the point is that we still have to do the work. And so I just want to say to you both, Michonne and Angel, that your representation in those chapters is so important as liaisons because, again, not for you to take the burden, but just for you to be that voice to say, yes, you can go here, or you can talk to this person, or we need to do this, but it doesn't mean you have to do this, right?
Right. That's
So,
right. Yeah. Angel, what kinds of things are you doing as the liaison in Tennessee? What kind of things are the Tennessee chapter doing?
So we well, was it recently? It was a couple months ago, but we have a state initiative funded program called Tip QC, and they did a training out in Memphis to, I believe it was to train doulas and to also a PSI training as well. And we were able to provide some scholarships for some of the attendees to be able to help them with the fees. The other thing that we do is because all of us on the board, or we all like work in some capacity in our communities of helping people of color. And um, we did. So I actually had a perinatal mood and anxiety awareness brunch. And so,
Mhm.
although I don't think we had too many moms, but it was a lot of professionals. But as professionals, we're moms too. So I guess you could say we had both. But
Mhm.
we had a pelvic floor therapist, we had a mental therapist, we had doulas, a nutritionist. We had everybody coming together to talk about how we can help bridge those gaps together, how we can further reach more families. Of course, we have the Army installation, and it was so refreshing to know that they actually are giving out to the military families the PSI information
Oh,
and
that's
all, yes, and all of the support groups and everything. So it's nice that when we see military families come on and be like, the hospital gave it to us, because for a while, myself and Megan, we were fighting to even have the military put, PSI's information just on these resources that they're giving to families that are, growing or pregnant. And it was just like, these are free resources. Like, we just want you to just get the word out. So um, we did that. And we also had a climb in Chattanooga earlier this year as well. And we have partnered with a local a local mom walking club. And so we were able to raise awareness with that. So yeah, we're always like plugging in PSI in different areas. And then this weekend we have um, my organization has a fall baby sprinkle for families in need in the community, and PSI is going to be there giving out information. So we just doing a lot of things.
That's amazing. Look at all this work we're doing. Mashawn, what are y'all doing over there in North Carolina? As the Alliance Liaison and helping the board out over there.
Well, I'm so grateful to the Alliance because we just had our annual meeting, and we were able to award two young ladies. We met in Robinson County, North Carolina, where that area is very highly influenced by the Lumbee Nation of Native
Mhm.
Americans. And we gave out two scholarships to two young ladies to be able to take the PSI training.
Oh, wow.
So they can get their certification. But also just looking at that particular area, just making them aware. We've also just recently had a chapter meetup that we're trying to solicit more interest in the board itself.
Mhm.
Again, to get more people that look like me, and we're going to have a chapter meetup coming up very soon. We have also gotten regional coordinators out in the North Carolina area to increase the number of providers in the area so that people will have alternatives and resources for them to reach out to in the North Carolina area.
I love that, Mashawn. So Mashawn is one of the chapters that, and I think Florida is the other, where you as the liaison, you're the Alliance Liaison, but you've identified people in different parts of the state
Right.
help, because these states are big, and it's
Yeah.
a state chapter, so you can come from anywhere in the state. Like Loudy said, like the New York board was all upstate and Long Island, so you have people from all over the state, and you've identified other people of color that can be point people for you around North Carolina.
Right. That's correct.
That's great. That is great. All right, Loudy, I want to ask this question. If money and resources were no object, right? What would your dream be for how to grow the work of the Alliance? Like, money's no object. What would we be doing?
That's a really good question. I think, hire more staff, I think, to represent
Mhm.
like different groups. There's so many groups, right? And I think you've done such an amazing job being so inclusive, but like even having represent people represent different, like like I have a worker that's Bengali, like someone to work with the Bengali community, someone that speaks Urdu, I don't know, like different. I think
Yeah.
having different programs, I think also growing it so that we even have maybe our own directory of providers,
Yeah.
and maybe having some grants or funds to have some of the alliance folks that do this work, and not just clinicians, doulas, like anyone like that, come in and like maybe provide to our communities and provide the
Yes.
services so that I can go to the alliance and click need help. And we currently have MPSI where you get help and you can go to the groups, and there's a group for Black women, Desi women, but I'm talking about like something where they can go to the Alliance section and write need help, and that we can connect them with a doula or a psychiatrist or a social worker or a reverend or spiritual person of color that can call them within a day or two and do, even if it's like a few sessions, because we would need a lot of money to just do long-term work for free. But even if it's just, we will give you a couple of sessions, and just to sort of see where you're at, and if you need more, we can help you, refer you somewhere
I
else.
love that. Yes, I really would love to do micro grants for providers to be able to, like, so you can provide your services without feeling like, some people will do it for like pro bono for free, but like, so that you shouldn't have to do that for free if you're a provider, that we could like pay you. And I'm thinking especially of a lot of the work that we've been doing with folks in Latin America too, and other parts of the world, the Caribbean, like where we could give money to providers so that women there who are in need of these services can get them from trained professionals, and the trained professionals don't have to feel like I've got to take this huge cut in my income, but let us help subsidize that. I love that. So Angel, if money were no object, right? Resources, no object. Bam, you ask it, you get it. What would you do in Tennessee for BIPOC folks in this area?
Uh, I I would love for them to be able to have free access to a therapist. I know that that is actually a need here. I know that's what a lot of families are asking for. I know that finances are the biggest thing right now. Um, and so I would say it would be that, or even if it's just like an event where we can like welcome, like how we did at conference. I love the conference like breakout that we do, where you can just come and just see everyone and network and engage, or just even find that friend, someone that you can talk to or lean on and just continue to bond with.
I love it. Okay, Mashawn, magic question. Same question. Money, no object. Resources, no object.
Definitely would have more providers of color available for the entire state. Like Angel said, free, just any access, just limited access to a provider, more providers of color. I would also want more persons of color on our board, as well as provide the training. Because, like Laudy said, the training for diversity, equity, and inclusion is expensive. And that's something that we have run into. We, have looked for providers to do that, but the board is not necessarily willing to put out the money to provide that training for the board. Well, I would like it to be able to not just provide it for the board, but for every member of PSI North Carolina.
Yes.
Just so you can see, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like? What are we talking about? When we say that, again, it's not just a buzzword, but those are true, meaningful words. Looking at equity as far as collaboration and just the impact that it could have on the state of North Carolina to be able to provide providers of color for every person that needed them. That would be my dream.
It's giving me all the feels. I started thinking about, and when you talked about the Native population that we were able to do the awards for, their people to attend training, I would love for us to have money in every state for us to do mobile perinatal health clinics. Right. And so I've done volunteer with an organization here because y'all know I'm a lawyer. Well, I'm not practicing right now, but I volunteer with an immigrant services organization here, and they had a mobile legal clinic, someplace in the state. Every weekend of the month, they partner with churches, and their lawyer would go around and sit there from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. and do intakes with people. And talk through their immigration issues, right? And then they would get on the client roster. So it's not just like that one time, let me just look at your case and tell you what you have to do. She'd take them on as clients. And so I would love for us to have resources to be able to do mobile clinics, in our states across. So, and because there are people who live in healthcare deserts, right? Across this country. And especially I'm thinking about our Native populations or folks that live in rural parts of even in the Midwest or the South. It would be great for us not to expect to set it up and to find a way for them to come to us, but how can we bring what they need to them, right? And that can be all encompassing, including perinatal mental health screening, perinatal mental health care, but also can we have doula services there to talk about what they do? Can we have midwives incorporated to check on their health? Can we do vital screenings and perinatal screenings, but bring it to folks in a way that is low or no cost to them? That just made me so excited. Well, nobody asked me the question, but I asked myself the question, and so that would be my that would be my dream, and that everybody, the other dream of mine, and probably through my research with my doctoral program, is that we really need to train clergy and other people in faith-based spaces who are in leadership about how to counsel and talk to people and to refer people out when they're experiencing perinatal mood disorders and need that kind of support. I talk all the time about my story after I had my second loss when I joined my previous church and I went in for spiritual counseling, and the pastor said, I can help you talk through the spiritual implications of this, but let's talk about getting you a therapist outside of here, right? And so it's one of the ways I knew that was the church for me, because it wasn't either or, it was both things. And he knew he was out of his depth, right? So that would be my other dream. I would love for us to build out, in some ways, connecting with clergy or alternative spaces where we know people of color go to seek help, support, and guidance, right? Because it might not be your pastor, it might be your hairdresser or your nail tech, right? But yes, I could go on and on for days about that if you'll let me dream. We're right at time, though. This has been such a great conversation. It's so wonderful to see all of your faces and to hear about all the work you're doing. Loudy, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I had also another thing I've been thinking a lot about is ancestral healing. And
Yes.
maybe we'll do another color, the conversation about that. But I would love to bring that to our communities. You know, oftentimes, I mean, Africa, Latin America, there's all this ancestral healing that happens, and there's this all this intergenerational trauma. And I just presented at a conference in Puerto Rico about this, that we have to stop saying, well, you have to do this Western medicine stuff, right? You can
Right.
do that and you can do ancestral healing stuff.
Yes.
So that's like my thing right now. I'm like pretty obsessed with that. So maybe we'll talk about that in
We
another session. But yeah, I just want to throw it
we
out there.
will.
We'd
And
love to offer that, you know, some program through the Alliance that we can offer something, something like
it's
that.
coming, Loudy. Guess what? We'll talk offline, but
Okay.
that was part of our conversation for coloring the conversation last month. Is we talked
Wonderful.
about ancestral practices. But thank you all. Thank you, Michonne. Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Loudy. Thank you so much for being with me today. This has been a great conversation, and I love that dreaming at the end. I'm glad we put it at the end because at the beginning, that whole
Yes.
conversation would have been about dreaming because I could have kept going off of everything y'all was saying. But if you are watching today and you are not already connected to us, we want to invite you to join and to connect with us on our social media. Follow us on Instagram. You can find us at postpartum.net. And if you go to join us, I think drop down, you'll find the Perinatal Mental Health Alliance for People of Color, or La Alianza, which is the alliance in Spanish. But more importantly, if you are finding yourself right now that you're struggling and you need to talk to someone now about how you're feeling, or you have a loved one or someone who you care about, or you're a provider and you're trying to link somebody to an immediate service, you can call the PSI helpline. It's a warm line. Somebody will be back with you in within 24 to 48 hours to connect you to resources in your area. Or you can call the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline at 833 TLC Mama. Over 60 languages spoken, and somebody can talk with you right now about how you're feeling. But if you are in crisis, meaning you feel like you don't know if you can last another day here, we want you to call the crisis line at 988. Only 3 numbers. Pick up, and somebody is there that can talk with you and help to get you the help that you need. Okay. Thanks so much to my wonderful guests, and we look forward to seeing all of you all next month again. All right. Take care. Have a great weekend.